Deep beneath the alluvial soil of southern Iraq lies a sterile, 2-foot-thick layer of fluvial clay, marking a catastrophic destruction event that terrified even the Anunnaki. Uncovered at the ancient site of Shuruppak, this geological stratum physically separates early Mesopotamian history with a violent, sudden reset. It perfectly matches the exact time frame when cuneiform tablets record these deities retreating into the heavens in uncontrolled panic. Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh explicitly records the Anunnaki cowering like dogs against the celestial walls as the floodwaters erased their infrastructure. Mainstream history views this as a localized natural disaster that overwhelmed a primitive agrarian society. However, archaeological data from the exact same early dynastic period presents a profound engineering contradiction that fundamentally breaks this official explanation. Less than 50 miles from the Shuruppak flood zone, this exact same civilization constructed the Girsu Bridge. This was not a simple pedestrian crossing. Recent excavations reveal it was a sophisticated hydraulic weir, demonstrating a deliberate application of the Venturi effect. Using specialized kiln-fired bricks and waterproof bitumen mortar, ancient engineers successfully narrowed a massive 30-meter canal down to a precise 4-meter throated flume to aggressively regulate fluid pressure. This level of hydraulic constriction engineering requires an empirical understanding of water displacement, flow rates, and structural load-bearing that mainstream history claims did not exist until the Roman Empire over 2 millennia later. The Girsu structure was designed to force high-velocity water into specific distribution networks without shattering the surrounding mud brick infrastructure. To achieve this, the Sumerian builders had to calculate the sheer force of millions of gallons of water and counter it with an impermeable matrix. These ancient Mesopotamians were not passive victims of their riparian environment. They were absolute masters of it. They actively terraformed the alluvial plain through a complex, interconnected network of massive levees, high-capacity reservoirs, and precise distribution canals. They managed the volatile spring melts of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, turning a harsh, arid landscape into the agricultural engine of the ancient world. This makes the narrative recorded in the ancient cuneiform deeply unsettling. If the Sumerian architects possessed the mathematical and structural capacity to throttle the flow of entire river tributaries, a standard seasonal flood would not trigger a societal collapse. Yet the physical 2-foot layer of sterile silt at Shuruppak proves the destruction was absolute and unforgiving. The sediment doesn't lie. The river systems they had so meticulously engineered violently overflowed, carrying enough velocity to shear massive mud brick ziggurats from their foundations and bury miles of urban development in an instant. The stratigraphy cleanly severs the Jemdet Nasr period from the early Dynastic I period, indicating a sudden and massive demographic wipeout across the region. Excavations reveal households frozen in time, buried under hundreds of thousands of tons of riverine mud. The engineering problem is clear. A civilization defined by its unprecedented mastery of high-pressure water control was entirely eradicated by it. It forces us to ask how a system built to withstand immense hydraulic pressure failed so catastrophically across the entire plain. But the physical flood was only the beginning of the anomaly. What happened next wasn't a localized river overflow. It was a hemispheric atmospheric collapse that completely reframes the scale of this ancient disaster. According to the Atrahasis Epic, dating back to the 18th century BCE, the Anunnaki Council realized immediately after the deluge that they had made a fatal, irreversible miscalculation. The text details a humiliating reality for these ruling figures. Without the human agrarian workforce to maintain the massive agricultural infrastructure and provide sustenance through scheduled grain and livestock offerings, the gods began to starve. The cuneiform explicitly describes the deities weeping, their lips parched with extreme thirst. It paints a pathetic image of supreme beings gathering, and I quote the translation directly, like flies around the very first sacrifice offered by the human flood survivor, Utnapishtim. This is not the triumphant language of untouchable supreme beings. It is the raw, recorded trauma of a profound logistical and agricultural failure. The elite class, deeply dependent on the labor of the masses, suddenly found their entire supply chain severed. Their advanced infrastructure was gone, their workforce was buried, and their survival was completely compromised. Looking at the sheer sophistication of the Girsu water control systems against this catastrophic failure recorded in the Atrahasis texts, we have to ask a critical question. Was this early civilization simply overpowered by a freak meteorological anomaly? Or does the timeline suggest a sudden loss of foundational engineering knowledge that left them defenseless? Let me know your stance in the comments below. Could this level of hydraulic mastery have been developed organically? Or are we looking at the remnants of an older, highly advanced infrastructure that later generations simply forgot how to operate? When we bypass the mythological terminology and analyze the forensic paleoclimatology of the region, the starving gods motif aligns perfectly with one of the most severe climate anomalies in Holocene history. Around 2200 BCE, an apocalyptic multi-century megadrought known as the 4.2 kiloyear event struck the globe. We don't need to guess if this happened. The geological record is irrefutable. High-resolution isotope data extracted from speleothems, specifically stalagmites in the Golzard Cave in Iran, and ice cores from distant glaciers confirm a massive disruption in the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. This sudden shift in oceanic currents dragged the intertropical convergence zone drastically southward. The result was an immediate, devastating cessation of rainfall across the Mediterranean, the Levant, and Mesopotamia. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the absolute lifeblood of the Sumerian and Akkadian irrigation networks, dwindled to a mere fraction of their normal volume. The crops failed entirely. The once fertile topsoil turned to useless dust, carried away by newly formed desert winds. The advanced hydraulic weirs, like the one at Girsu, became useless, dry monuments stranded in a scorched wasteland. The literal starvation of the ruling class, the elite administrative stratum documented in the texts as the Anunnaki, was not a myth, but a verifiable demographic reality. The agricultural backbone of their empire collapsed under a century of unrelenting drought. Massive populations of Amorite nomads, desperate for water and grazing land, began pushing violently into the Mesopotamian plain, further destabilizing a society already on the brink of total starvation. The administrative records from this period show a frantic, failed attempt to ration grain, as the state apparatus slowly suffocated under the weight of an unyielding climate shift. Here at Ancient Chronicles HD, our mission is to peel back the layers of myth and expose the hard, verifiable data buried beneath the dirt. If you demand historical accuracy and forensic truth over mainstream assumptions, hit the subscribe button and join the investigation. We rely on the geology and the archaeology to tell the real story of human history. This brings us to the final chilling piece of the puzzle, the Sumerian city laments. If the Epic of Gilgamesh records the initial panic of the flood, and the Atrahasis records the starvation of the subsequent drought, texts like the Lament for Ur, composed around 2000 BCE, document the final, clinical abandonment of a dying civilization. The Lament for Ur details a solemn, high-stakes assembly where the Anunnaki Council issues a stark decree: the physical city of Ur is no longer tenable. Despite the desperate pleas of the city's patron goddess, Ningal, who begs the council to spare her people, she is coldly overruled by Anu and Enlil. The text does not describe a magical ascension into the heavens. It describes a tactical, physical withdrawal from a doomed geopolitical sector. The gods are recorded actively packing up their wealth, vacating their monumental ziggurats, and fleeing the temples to escape an incoming slaughter. The historical reality behind this divine abandonment is meticulously verified by the archaeological record. The 4.2 kiloyear megadrought weakened the Ur III dynasty so severely that the entire state apparatus fractured. Without food, the military dissolved. The defensive walls were breached. This systemic vulnerability allowed foreign invaders, specifically the Elamites from the Zagros Mountains to the east, to sweep into the alluvial plain and systematically execute the remaining starving population. The ancient scribes documented this geopolitical collapse as a physical abandonment by their architects. The fleeing of the gods was the ancient world's framework for recording a total breakdown of state infrastructure. It was the desertion of the civilian population by an elite ruling class who saw the end coming, packed up what resources they had left, and left the masses to burn at the hands of the Elamite hordes. The panic wasn't divine, it was entirely, tragically human. We still cannot fully explain how an advanced hydraulic infrastructure completely collapsed under the weight of this climate shift without any localized contingencies being successfully enacted. How does an empire that maps the stars and engineers high-pressure canals simply let its population starve to death? This atmospheric reset wasn't isolated to Mesopotamia. Another highly advanced empire across the globe was simultaneously erased by an identical civilization-ending megadrought. The video on your screen right now about Mayan collapse breaks down the exact geological data of how it happened and is the closest anyone has gotten to an answer. Click it and let's keep digging. Thanks for watching Ancient Chronicles HD.